The October dawn crept through Norwich's narrow streets like smoke from a poorly tended hearth, and Thomas Blackwood was already at work. Listen closely, and you might hear him humming, a low, rhythmic tune that matched the scrape of his brushes against brick. He was cleaning his tools in the yard behind his workshop on Timber Hill, each brush and rod laid out with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. This was his ritual, you see, performed every morning before the church bells struck 6. Young Billy watched from the doorway, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "The bristles go counter to the grain," Thomas murmured, demonstrating the proper technique. The boy nodded, though whether he truly understood was another matter. Teaching an apprentice required patience, Thomas had learned, especially one who'd spent his first 11 years in the workhouse. The morning air carried more than just the usual coal smoke and horse dung. There was talk, nervous, hushed conversations that drifted from doorways and market stalls. Cholera had reached London again. The disease moved like an unwelcome relative, arriving without warning and overstaying its presence. Thomas had seen it take his Mary 3 years past, though the doctors called hers consumption. Disease, he'd learned, cared nothing for the names men gave it. Mrs. Whitmore from the bakery crossed herself as she passed. "They say it travels on the railway lines," she whispered to her companion. The railways, another change threading through England's ancient fabric. Progress, some called it. Thomas reserved judgment. A chimney was a chimney, whether it served a cottage or a factory. The workshop bell rang just as Thomas finished oiling the last of his climbing irons. Billy scrambled to answer it, nearly tripping over the pile of soot bags by the door. Through the window, Thomas glimpsed a carriage. Not the usual cart or trap that brought his custom, but a proper carriage with matched horses and a liveried driver. The man who descended wore the pressed black uniform of a senior household servant. "Mr. Blackwood?" The man's accent carried the careful pronunciation of one who'd risen through service. "I come from Thornfield Manor. Mrs. Hartley requests your particular expertise." Thornfield Manor. Thomas knew it by reputation, one of those grand Tudor houses that dotted the Norfolk countryside like memories of another age. 20 miles through autumn fields and villages that hadn't changed since the Doomsday Book, save for the occasional factory chimney piercing the horizon. The servant explained the urgency. "There's a chimney in the library that hasn't been used these past 20 years. The staff report unusual sounds." He paused, choosing his words. "Mrs. Hartley insists on discretion." Thomas understood. In his trade, one learned that great houses harbored more than just soot and bird nests. He quoted his fee, fair but not modest. The rich, he'd learned, distrusted anything that came too cheap. By noon, Thomas and Billy were rattling along the Norwich Road in his cart, tools secured in the back with the methodical care that marked all his work. The boy marveled at the changing landscape, the city's cramped streets giving way to harvested fields, golden stubble catching the October light. Steam from a distant locomotive traced a line across the sky, heading to London with its cargo of grain and worry. Thomas found himself thinking about spaces, the dark, narrow spaces he'd spent half his life navigating. Every chimney told a story if you knew how to read it. The soot patterns spoke of seasons, of feast and famine, of careful fires and careless ones. The rich burned coal, the poor burned whatever they could find. He'd pulled everything from bird nests to love letters from chimney breasts, each discovery a small window into the lives lived around the hearth. "Will it be haunted, Mr. Blackwood?" Billy asked, his voice carrying that mixture of fear and hope particular to 12-year-old boys. Thomas allowed himself a rare smile. Every old house has its ghosts, boy. Question is, whether they're the kind that rattle chains or the kind that rattle consciences. The Norfolk countryside rolled past, church spires marking villages like pins on a map. Laborers bent in fields gathering the last of the harvest, smoke rising from cottages where families would be preparing their midday meal. This was England's backbone, Thomas reflected, though London's makers of policy rarely remembered it existed. As Thornfield Manor rose from behind a screen of ancient oaks, Thomas felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Great houses meant great secrets. The manor was built of that honey-colored stone that caught the light and held it. Its Tudor chimneys twisted like barley sugar against the gray sky. Beautiful, certainly, but beauty, in Thomas's experience, often served as decoration for something else entirely. The approach was lined with elm trees, their leaves turning the color of old brass. Billy counted the chimneys, 15 visible from this angle alone. Each one would have its own particular character, its own accumulation of years. Thomas's practiced eye noted which showed signs of recent use, which had been capped, which might hide architectural surprises within their dark throats. Mrs. Eleanor Hartley stood in the manor's entrance hall like a general surveying her domain. Her keys jangled at her waist, that peculiar music of authority that every housekeeper worth her salt carried. She assessed Thomas with quick, intelligent eyes, the sort that missed nothing and forgave less. "Mr. Blackwood, your reputation precedes you." Her voice carried that particular blend of courtesy and command that came from 15 years of managing a great house. "We have a delicate situation." She led them through the corridors lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to track their movement. The house smelled of beeswax and old wood, underlaid with something else, that indefinable scent of age and secrets that seeped from ancient walls. Billy stayed close, his wonder at the grandeur warring with an instinctive unease. The library, when they reached it, took Thomas's breath for just a moment. Books climbed to the ceiling, leather spines like geological strata marking centuries of accumulation. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through tall windows. And there, on the far wall, stood the fireplace, a massive Tudor construction, its mantel carved with roses and thorns intertwined. "This chimney hasn't been used since Sir Edmund's father passed in 1823, Mrs. Hartley explained. She lowered her voice, though they were alone. "Last month, one of the maids heard voices coming from within." Thomas approached the hearth with professional interest. The fireback was cast iron, decorated with the Thornfield arms, an oak tree wrapped with a serpent, symbolic perhaps of wisdom and temptation intertwined. He ran his fingers along the stone, feeling for drafts, checking the mortar lines. "Voices, you say?" "Whispers, mostly. Sometimes what sounds like weeping." Mrs. Hartley's composure cracked slightly. "The girl, Sally, a sensible creature normally, refuses to enter the room alone now." Thomas knelt, peering up into the darkness of the flue. The construction was unusual, wider than standard, with what appeared to be a secondary shaft branching off at an angle. Tudor builders, he knew, sometimes incorporated priest holes and hidden passages into their designs. Norfolk had been Catholic country once, before the Reformation rewrote England's spiritual map. "Billy, fetch the mirrors and the number 3 brush set." As the boy scurried off, Thomas continued his examination. The soot patterns were wrong. Too little accumulation for 20 years of disuse. Someone, or something, had disturbed the natural settling. He detected a faint draft, not from above, but from the side, carrying with it, yes, there it was, a sound like distant conversation, distorted and hollow. Mrs. Hartley watched him work with an intensity that suggested more than professional interest. "Sir Edmund is hosting important guests next week. Railway investors from London. We cannot have disturbances." Thomas understood. The railway boom had made and broken fortunes. Sir Edmund Thornfield, grain merchant and landowner, would be keen to position himself advantageously in this new economy. Ghostly voices would hardly inspire confidence in potential partners. Billy returned with the equipment, and Thomas began his systematic exploration. He tied a rope around his waist, old habit from his early days when boys younger than Billy died in chimneys trapped in the dark, and began his ascent. The shaft was indeed wider than normal, accommodating a man's frame with surprising ease. 20 feet up, his fingers found what he'd suspected, a joint in the brickwork that didn't belong. Pressing against it yielded nothing, but when he traced the mortar lines, he discovered a pattern, a cross, worked into the brick itself. He pressed the center and felt rather than heard a click. A section of the wall swung inward on hinges that, despite their age, moved with well-oiled silence. Someone had maintained this mechanism recently. "Mr. Blackwood?" Mrs. Hartley's voice echoed up from below, tinged with anxiety. "All's well, ma'am. Just examining the structure." But all was not well, or at least not simple. Through the opening, Thomas glimpsed a space no larger than a coffin stood on end. The walls were plastered, with hooks that might once have held a crucifix or holy picture. A priest hole, without doubt. One of those desperate sanctuaries where Catholic priests hid during Elizabeth's persecutions. And from somewhere beyond its walls came voices, clear now, though muffled, a man's voice, authoritative and irritated. "The Liverpool line is hemorrhaging money. If we don't secure the grain transport contracts..." Sir Edmund Thornfield, unless Thomas missed his guess. The priest hole must share a wall with the master's study. The chimney shaft, with its peculiar acoustics, had transformed into an enormous ear trumpet, carrying conversations from one room to another. Thomas descended carefully, his mind working through the implications. When his feet touched the library floor again, he found Mrs. Hartley studying his face with those sharp eyes. "Well, the chimney needs cleaning, certain enough, but it's a complex job. That shaft has some unusual construction. Tudor builders had their tricks." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'll need to come back tomorrow with specialized equipment. Best if the library remains undisturbed until then." She nodded slowly, and Thomas caught something in her expression. Not quite relief, not quite disappointment. "Very well. You may leave your equipment here overnight if needed." As Thomas and Billy gathered their initial tools, a young man entered the library with the casual authority of ownership. James Thornfield had his father's sharp features, but none of his gravity. His clothes spoke of London tailoring and habits his income couldn't support. Thomas had cleaned enough gaming house chimneys to recognize the type. "The famous chimney sweep," James said, his tone light but his eyes watchful. "I trust you'll solve our little mystery?" "I solve problems with chimneys, sir." Mysteries tend to solve themselves, given time. James's smile didn't reach his eyes. How philosophical. Though in my experience, some mysteries are better left undisturbed. The threat was subtle as smoke, but present nonetheless. Thomas touched his cap respectfully, playing the humble tradesman, though his mind was racing. Young Thornfield knew something about that chimney, that priest hole. The question was what, and more importantly, why? The morning mist clung to Thornfield Manor's grounds like a guilty conscience when Thomas returned. He'd spent the night thinking, turning over the problem like a piece of coal in his fingers, examining every facet. Billy had peppered him with questions during the journey back, but Thomas had remained largely silent, lost in calculation. Now, standing once more before the library fireplace, tools arranged with methodical precision, he prepared for a performance. Mrs. Hartley hovered nearby, having dismissed the servants from this wing of the house. Her presence was both protective and watchful. A guardian, unsure whether Thomas represented salvation or threat. "I'll need absolute quiet," Thomas said, strapping on his climbing leathers. "The structure up there is more delicate than I first thought." She nodded and withdrew to the doorway, though Thomas felt her attention remained fixed on him. Billy stationed himself at the hearth space, ready with ropes and brushes, playing his part in their small theater. Thomas ascended into darkness again, this time with deliberate slowness. Each handhold, each foothold, measured and careful. The brick was cool against his palms, rough from centuries of heat and expansion. 20 feet up, he found the hidden panel again. The mechanism opened smoothly, and Thomas squeezed through into the priest hole. The space was a marvel of desperate engineering. Perhaps 4 feet by 3, just tall enough for a man to stand upright. The walls showed water stains from some long-ago leak, and the air tasted of dust and old fear. How many hours had some forgotten priest spent here, listening to Elizabeth's soldiers search the house, every creak of floorboard potentially announcing discovery and death? But it was the floor that drew Thomas's attention. Fresh disturbances in the dust, footprints too recent to belong to any Tudor refugee. And there, a stub of candle, the wax still pliable. Someone had been here within the past week. Thomas examined the walls more carefully. One section, he realized, was thinner, a partition rather than proper masonry. Pressing his ear against it brought immediate reward. Sir Edmund's voice, clear as if he stood beside him. "The Norfolk grain must reach London markets before the Lincolnshire harvest. It's a matter of timing, Ashworth." Another voice, older, measured. The Reverend, perhaps, acting as informal advisor. Thomas knew the type. Country clergy who served as counselors to the local gentry, bridges between Old England and New. Searching the confined space, Thomas's fingers found something wedged behind a loose stone, papers, folded small. He extracted them carefully, angling them toward the thin light filtering through the chimney opening. Gambling markers from a London establishment, the Golden Wheel. James Thornfield's signature sprawled across IOUs totaling, Thomas blinked, £3,000. A fortune. More than Thomas might earn in 20 years of hard labor. Understanding crystallized like frost on glass. Young Thornfield was using this space to spy on his father's business dealings, seeking information to trade or sell to cover his debts. The haunted chimney served his purposes, keeping servants away while he gathered intelligence. A sound from below made Thomas freeze, footsteps in the library, quick and purposeful. He pressed himself against the wall, hardly breathing, reminded absurdly of the priest who might once have done the same. The footsteps paused directly below, then continued. After a moment, he heard the library door close. Thomas descended carefully, emerging from the chimney to find Billy wide-eyed with worry. "Someone came in, Mr. Blackwood. Young Mr. Thornfield. He looked right angry when he saw you were already up the chimney." Indeed. The game was becoming clearer, but also more dangerous. Thomas considered his options while cleaning soot from his hands with methodical care. He could report his discovery to Sir Edmund, but that would destroy the son and possibly the family's reputation. He could confront James directly, but young men with 3,000 pounds of debt rarely responded well to pressure from their social inferiors. "Billy," Thomas said quietly, "fetch Mrs. Hartley. Tell her I need to examine some of the other chimneys to understand the full network." The boy scampered off, leaving Thomas alone with the weight of knowledge. He thought of his Mary, dead these 3 years, and how she'd always said his greatest weakness was believing the best of people until proven otherwise. But perhaps that wasn't weakness. Perhaps it was the only way a man could navigate between the grinding stones of conscience and survival. Mrs. Hartley arrived with a rustle of black bombazine and worry. "You've found something." It wasn't a question. "The chimney's construction is more complex than I expected. These Tudor builders, they understood that houses need to breathe, need spaces between spaces." He met her eyes steadily. Sometimes those spaces get used for purposes their creators never intended. Her face remained composed, but Thomas caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She knew, or at least suspected. "Can you address the problem?" "Every problem has a solution, ma'am. Question is whether the cure might prove worse than the disease." She studied him for a long moment, and Thomas saw in her expression something he recognized, the careful calculation of someone who'd learned to navigate between servant and served, loyalty and survival. "Sir Edmund values discretion above all else," she said finally, "as do I." "Then we understand each other." She produced a key from her enormous ring. "This opens the door to Sir Edmund's study. He's gone to Norwich on business, won't return until evening. Perhaps your examination of the chimney network would benefit from thoroughness." Thomas took the key, its weight both promise and burden. Mrs. Hartley withdrew, and Thomas realized he'd been granted something rare, the trust of someone who trusted rarely. Or perhaps she simply recognized in him another soul caught between the upper and nether millstones of English society. The study was everything the library was not. Sparse, functional, dominated by a massive desk covered in ledgers and correspondence. The fireplace here was modern, rebuilt sometime in the last century. Thomas examined the wall it shared with the priest hole, finding what he expected, the partition, thin enough to transmit sound clearly. Among the papers on the desk, grain prices and railway timetables predominated. Sir Edmund was planning something significant involving transport contracts, information that would be valuable to competitors or to men seeking to manipulate markets. Information worth enough, perhaps, to save a desperate young man from his creditors. Thomas heard approaching footsteps and quickly returned to the library. James Thornfield stood there, his composure less perfect than yesterday. "Still working, Blackwood?" "Chimneys don't clean themselves, sir." "No, James said softly. "They don't." "Tell me, in your professional experience, what's the best way to deal with blockages?" Thomas considered James Thornfield's question about blockages while his hands continued their steady work with brush and rod. The young man stood too still, like a cat pretending disinterest in a mouse hole. "Depends on the nature of the blockage, sir. Some need gentle coaxing. Others require more forceful measures." James moved closer to the hearth, his expensive boots silent on the Turkish carpet. "And if the blockage is, shall we say, sensitive? Something that might damage the entire structure if handled carelessly?" The threat hung between them like soot in still air. Thomas had dealt with dangerous men before, not gentlemen like James, but men whose desperation made them unpredictable. The principle remained the same: never show fear, never show knowledge. "Then a wise craftsman proceeds with particular care," Thomas replied, emerging from the chimney to select a different brush. His movements remained unhurried, professional. Billy watched from the corner, smart enough to sense the tension, young enough to not fully understand it. The library door opened, and Sir Edmund himself entered, earlier than expected from his Norwich business. He moved stiffly, the gout, Thomas supposed, but his presence filled the room with immediate authority. James straightened like a soldier caught sleeping on watch. "Father, I didn't expect." "Evidently." Sir Edmund's gaze swept from his son to Thomas, sharp as winter wind. "The chimney sweep. Hartley mentioned you'd found complications." "Nothing that can't be resolved, sir," Thomas said, touching his cap. Sir Edmund approached the fireplace, examining it as if seeing it for the first time in years. "This room holds memories. My father conducted much of his business here. Different times, no railways then, just canal barges and cart roads. Everything moved slower." He paused, lost in thought. "Sometimes I wonder if slower wasn't better." "Progress has its price," James said too quickly. His father turned that penetrating gaze on him. "Indeed. Speaking of which, I've been reviewing the accounts. There are some discrepancies. Withdrawals I don't recall authorizing." The color drained from James's face, but before he could respond, voices drifted from somewhere above, or was it beside the fireplace? Clear enough to understand, distorted enough to seem supernatural. A conversation about grain prices, railway shares, the delicate dance of commerce and compromise. Sir Edmund froze. "What in God's name?" Thomas made a decision born of instinct rather than calculation. "Acoustic anomaly, sir. These old chimneys, they can carry sound in peculiar ways, like speaking tubes on a ship, but unintentional." He gestured to the chimney. "I've been tracking the source. Seems to connect to several rooms." The older man's eyes narrowed. "Several rooms? Including my study?" "Possibly, sir. I'd need to investigate further." Father and son exchanged glances. Sir Edmund's suspicious, James's carefully blank. The moment stretched taut until Mrs. Hartley's arrival broke it. She carried a tea tray, though no one had requested refreshment. Thomas recognized the intervention of someone skilled in diffusing household tensions. "Sir Edmund, Reverend Ashworth has called. He's in the morning room." The master of the house limped toward the door, pausing to address Thomas. "Complete your investigation, Blackwood. I want a full report. Every anomaly, every connection." His gaze lingered on James. "We'll discuss those accounts later." After he left, James slumped against the mantelpiece. For a moment, his carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing the frightened young man beneath. £3,000, he said, so quietly Thomas almost missed it. It might as well be 30,000. Mrs. Hartley set down the tea tray with deliberate force. "Mr. James, perhaps you should join your father and the Reverend." "So they can sermonize about responsibility? About duty to the family name?" Bitterness crept into his voice. "Easy to preach when you've never felt the cards turn against you, never watched certainty become debt in a single hand." Thomas understood then the particular trap that caught young gentlemen. Born to privilege but not quite enough wealth, raised for a station they couldn't quite afford, torn between the expectations of their class and the realities of their purses. He'd seen it before, cleaning the chimneys of gaming houses where such men gathered like moths to flames. "Billy," Thomas said, "go check the equipment in the cart. Make sure everything's secure." The boy left reluctantly, sensing adult matters beyond his understanding. When he was gone, Thomas spoke carefully. "That priest hole upstairs. Interesting bit of history." James went very still. "Of course, history's just dead stories unless someone brings them back to life, makes them present again." Thomas continued working, not meeting anyone's eyes. Funny thing about those old hiding places, they were built for sanctuary, not spying. Using them wrong might bring the wrong kind of attention. "Are you threatening me, Blackwood?" But the young man's voice lacked conviction. "I'm a chimney sweep, sir. I clean things, make them work proper again. Sometimes that means removing blockages. Sometimes it means understanding why they formed in the first place." Mrs. Hartley poured tea with steady hands, though Thomas noticed the slight tremble in the liquid surface. "Mr. Blackwood has a reputation for discretion, Mr. James, and for finding solutions to difficult problems." The young man laughed, short and bitter. "Solutions? You think there's a solution to 3,000 pounds of debt? To creditors who've begun making threats?" Thomas had been poor all his life, had known the weight of empty pockets and emptier stomachs, but he'd also learned that desperation made men dangerous to themselves and others. "There's always a solution, sir. Question is whether folks are willing to accept it." Voices drifted again from the chimney. Sir Edmund discussing railway investments with the Reverend. James's eyes flickered toward the sound, calculating, desperate. Thomas saw him weighing possibilities, moral arithmetic performed in the currency of survival. "The London investors arrive in 3 days," James said finally. "Father's planning something significant with the grain transport contracts. Information worth considerable sums to the right parties. Or worth a son to a father, if handled proper," Thomas said quietly. The words hung in the air like dust motes in afternoon light. Mrs. Hartley's cup rattled against its saucer, the first sign of agitation she'd shown. James stared at Thomas as if seeing him for the first time. This soot-covered tradesman who spoke of things beyond his station. "You don't understand," James began, but Thomas interrupted. "I understand that every choice has consequences, sir. Some we can live with, some we can't. The trick is knowing the difference before it's too late to choose again." Billy's footsteps echoed in the corridor, returning from his errand. The moment of possibility contracted, collapsed. James straightened, rebuilding his gentleman's armor. "Complete your work, Blackwood. Send your bill to Mrs. Hartley." He strode from the room, leaving questions hanging in the air like smoke from an unswept chimney. That evening, Thomas took lodgings at the village inn rather than returning to Norwich. The plow and harrow squatted beside the turnpike road like a toad made of timber and thatch, serving travelers and locals alike with equal indifference. Billy slept on a straw mattress by the fire, while Thomas sat in the common room, nursing a mug of ale and his thoughts. The innkeeper, a garrulous man named Fenwick, proved eager to talk about the great house. "Strange times at Thornfield," he confided, polishing glasses that didn't need it. "Young Mr. James coming and going at all hours. Took a horse out past midnight last Tuesday. Didn't return till dawn." Thomas made encouraging noises while cataloging this information. The Golden Wheel, James's London creditor, would have agents even in Norfolk. Men who collected debts through persuasion first, other methods second. A midnight ride might mean a meeting, a negotiation, or something worse. The next morning brought rain, the kind that turned Norfolk's roads to mud and its skies to pewter. Thomas arrived at Thornfield to find the household in subdued chaos. Servants scurried through corridors. Mrs. Hartley issued rapid instructions, and from somewhere came the sound of Sir Edmund's raised voice. "Mr. Blackwood," Mrs. Hartley intercepted him at the servants' entrance. "There's been a development." She led him not to the library, but through a narrow staircase to the upper floors. Thomas noticed her keys were out, jangling with her rapid stride. They stopped at a door he recognized. It opened onto a corridor that led to Sir Edmund's study. "Mr. James didn't come down to breakfast," she said quietly. "His bed hasn't been slept in." Thomas felt the weight of possibility settling on his shoulders. Young men with gambling debts sometimes chose permanent solutions to temporary problems. "Has Sir Edmund been informed?" "Not yet. I thought perhaps you might assist in a discreet search first." They climbed narrow servants' stairs that Thomas hadn't seen before, emerging into the manor's maze of Tudor-era passages. Mrs. Hartley moved with surprising familiarity through these hidden corridors, the secret geography known only to servants and shadows. A sound made them both freeze, footsteps above in the attics. They climbed further, the stairs growing narrower, the air thick with dust and decades. Finally, they emerged into a long, low space beneath the eaves. And there was James Thornfield, very much alive, crouched beside a chimney stack. He spun at their entrance, and Thomas saw immediately that the young man had been crying. His expensive clothes were disheveled, his hands black with soot. Behind him, a hole had been opened in the chimney's base, another entrance to the network of hidden spaces. "Mr. James," Mrs. Hartley's voice carried maternal concern beneath professional distance. "Your father knows. He knows everything," James laughed, high and slightly wild. "The Reverend told him about the debts, the creditors, all of it." Apparently, Christian conscience demanded honesty. Thomas approached slowly, as one might approach a spooked horse. The opening in the chimney revealed another priest hole, this one larger than the library's. Papers scattered the floor, letters, documents, what looked like architectural drawings of the house. "My grandfather's papers," James explained, seeing Thomas's gaze. "He documented all the hiding places. There are 7 in total, a whole network built during Elizabeth's persecutions." He held up a yellowed document. "The family was Catholic then, you see. Treasonous by definition. They hid priests, held secret masses, risked everything for faith." Thomas understood the parallel James was drawing between ancestral secrets and his own. Every generation thought its sins unique, but they were all variations on ancient themes. "Your father," Thomas said carefully, "he's a practical man." "Practical," James spat the word. "He's already calculating the cost." £3,000 against the family reputation. The railway investors arrive tomorrow. He can't afford scandal now. Billy appeared at the top of the stairs, breathless from running. "Mr. Blackwood, sir. There's men coming up the drive. 3 of them, in a black carriage." James went pale. Thomas recognized the signs. Creditors didn't usually make house calls unless patience had expired. "Mrs. Hartley, take Billy downstairs. Tell Sir Edmund his son is indisposed. Give us 10 minutes." She hesitated, then nodded, shepherding Billy away. Thomas turned to James, who stood frozen between flight and collapse. "Listen carefully," Thomas said. "There's soot all over you. You've been helping me inspect the chimneys. Your father requested a complete survey before the investors arrive. You've been up here since dawn, which is why you missed breakfast. Understand? But the papers, the priest holes, are historical curiosities your family's preserved. Nothing more." Thomas pulled out his handkerchief, black with professional use. "Wipe your face, but leave some soot. You need to look like you've been working." As James cleaned himself partially, Thomas gathered the scattered documents, sorting them quickly. Most were indeed historical. Accounts of persecution, lists of hidden Catholics, architectural modifications, but several were modern. Letters from London creditors, threatening in their politeness. "They'll want their money," James said desperately. "They'll want something. Men like that always do. But if your father knows, he's already calculating how to handle it." Thomas remembered Sir Edmund's sharp eyes, his reference to discrepancies. "He's a grain merchant. He understands that sometimes you have to accept a loss to preserve the harvest." Footsteps echoed up the stairs, heavy, purposeful, not servants. Thomas positioned himself by the chimney opening, tools in hand, the picture of professional concentration. James stood beside him, holding a brush awkwardly but with determination. Sir Edmund appeared first, followed by 3 men in London clothes, dark wool, gold watch chains, the uniform of prosperity, with menace beneath. They surveyed the scene. The working-class chimney sweep, the soot-covered air, the opened chimney, revealing historical architecture. "As you can see, gentlemen," Sir Edmund said, his voice steady as granite, "my son is engaged in preserving our family heritage. These priest holes are of considerable historical interest." One of the London men, older than the others, with eyes like chips of coal, smiled thinly. "How fascinating. Young Mr. Thornfield seems quite industrious." "I believe in understanding one's history," James managed, his voice almost steady. The man's gaze swept the room, cataloging, calculating. "Indeed, and history, as they say, is often a matter of debt." He paused, letting the word hang. "But perhaps we might discuss more recent obligations in private?" Sir Edmund nodded. "My study, gentlemen. James, continue your investigations." As they turned to leave, he added, "Blackwood, I'll want a full report on these passages, every entrance, every connection. Some things are better sealed permanently." After they left, James sagged against the wall. "He's going to pay them. Maybe, or maybe he'll negotiate. Your father didn't build his fortune by accepting first offers." Thomas began gathering his tools, the performance ending. "But you need to decide something, sir. These priest holes, this network, it saved lives once. What's it saving now?" James looked at the documents in his hands, generations of secrets documented in fading ink.
I thought information was power, that if I knew enough, could sell enough. Information's just information, Thomas said.
It's what we do with it that gives it power or poison. Through the narrow window, they could see the black carriage in the drive below. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and somehow smaller. Billy appeared again at the stairs, sent by Mrs. Hartley to check on them. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Hartley says to tell you there's work in the kitchen chimneys too, if you're willing." Thomas almost smiled. The housekeeper was offering him reason to stay, to remain part of whatever resolution was coming. He appreciated the gesture, even as he recognized its implications. The kitchen chimneys at Thornfield Manor carried their own particular burden of grease and time. Thomas worked methodically while the cook, a formidable woman named Mrs. Bassett, directed preparations for tomorrow's arrival of the railway investors. The smell of roasting meat and baking bread filled the air, honest scents that grounded Thomas after the morning's tensions. Billy sat in the corner, supposedly cleaning brushes, but actually listening to the kitchen maids gossip. Their chatter provided a different perspective on the household's troubles. How young Mr. James had been seen at the Norwich races. How Sir Edmund's temper had grown shorter as the railway negotiations approached. How Mrs. Hartley had been burning candles late into the night, reviewing household accounts. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Reverend Ashworth arrived, shaking rain from his coat like a troubled heron. Thomas observed him from his position by the kitchen chimney, a man of 60-odd years carrying the weight of rural England's conscience on his narrow shoulders. Mrs. Hartley escorted him to Sir Edmund's study, but Thomas caught their exchange in the corridor. "I fear I may have precipitated matters unnecessarily," the Reverend said quietly. "You did what conscience demanded," she replied, though her tone suggested complexity beneath agreement. Later, when Thomas took his tea break in the servants' hall, Mrs. Hartley joined him. They sat in companionable silence before she spoke. "My late husband was a clerk in London, worked for a banking house. He saw what debt could do to men, how it twisted them into shapes they didn't recognize." Thomas waited, understanding this was prelude to something important. "The Thornfield family has held this land since Henry VIII seized it from the monastery. Catholic to Protestant in one generation, because survival demanded it." She traced patterns on the worn wooden table. The Reverend knew the family when they still remembered being Catholic. His own grandfather was hidden in those priest holes back when dissent meant death. And now he's betrayed their descendants' secret? Not betrayal. Prevention, perhaps. He's seen what happens when young men choose permanent solutions to temporary problems. Her voice carried the weight of unspoken stories. Thomas thought of James in the attic, surrounded by ancestral documents, trying to read his future in his family's past. Every generation faced its crucible: faith, debt, progress, survival. The shapes changed, but the pressure remained constant. That evening, Thomas made an unusual decision. Instead of returning to the inn, he requested permission to continue working through the night, mapping the complete network of passages and chimneys. Sir Edmund, distracted by preparations for tomorrow's meeting, granted it absently. As darkness fell, Thomas found himself back in the library's priest hole, this time with proper lamps and measuring tools. He was documenting the space when he heard footsteps in the chimney shaft below. James climbed up, moving with newfound confidence in the confined space. "My father paid them," he said without preamble.
Not the full amount. He negotiated it down to £1,800.
The rest to be paid from my inheritance when I turn 25. Thomas continued his measurements, giving the young man space to talk. He also informed me that I'll be working in the business. Real work, learning the grain trade from the warehouse up. No more allowance, no more London seasons. James laughed, short and bitter. He says I need to understand the value of money. Harsh, but fair, Thomas observed. The Reverend convinced him, told him about Catholic families who lost everything refusing to bend, and Protestant families who gained everything by adapting. James explored the priest hole's walls with curious fingers. Apparently, flexibility is our family tradition. Through the thin partition came the muffled sound of Sir Edmund's voice, still working despite the hour. The railway meeting would determine much of Norfolk's economic future. Traditional landowners were scrambling to position themselves in this new world of iron and steam. The Reverend showed me something, James continued. A letter from 1603. My ancestor writing to his son, explaining why they were converting to the Anglican Church. He wrote that God would understand the difference between survival and belief. Thomas thought of his own compromises, the daily negotiations between principle and necessity. Every man makes his accommodations. I was going to sell my father's railway negotiations to his competitors. The confession hung in the air like incense. I had it all planned. Use this network of passages to gather information, sell it to cover my debts. But you didn't. No, though I'm not certain why. Fear of discovery, conscience, or simply inability to execute the plan? James turned to face Thomas directly. What would you have done? It was the kind of question that had no good answer, only honest ones. I'd have been tempted, Thomas admitted. Poverty's its own kind of prison. But I'd remember that breaking out of one cage by entering another isn't escape. They heard footsteps below, Mrs. Hartley's measured tread. She called up softly, Mr. Blackwood? The Reverend would like a word, if you can spare a moment. Thomas descended to find the old minister waiting in the library, examining the carved mantelpiece by lamplight. His fingers traced the roses and thorns with scholarly interest. Magnificent craftsmanship, he said without turning. The Tudors understood that beauty could hide strength, or strength could hide purpose. He faced Thomas. You've discovered our local secret, I understand. Priest holes aren't uncommon in houses of this age, Reverend. No, but networks of them are. The Thornfields were ambitious in their faith, whether Catholic or Protestant. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Young James reminds me of his grandfather, brilliant, impulsive, prone to magnificent failures and occasional redemptions. You knew about his debts before you told Sir Edmund. It wasn't a question, but the Reverend nodded. The burden of knowledge, Mr. Blackwood. When does silence become complicity? When does truth become cruelty? He sighed. I've buried too many young men who thought death solved more than it ended. Thomas understood then why the Reverend had acted. Not from moral superiority, but from moral exhaustion. Tired of presiding over preventable tragedies. There's a story about these passages, the Reverend continued. During the Civil War, they hid royalists. During the Restoration, parliamentarians. The family survived by offering sanctuary to whoever needed it, regardless of politics or faith. He smiled sadly. Perhaps that's the true Thornfield tradition. Not flexibility, but hospitality. Billy appeared at the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes.
Mr.
Blackwood, it's past midnight. Time had slipped away like smoke up a chimney. Thomas realized he'd been at Thornfield for nearly 20 hours, longer than any simple cleaning job warranted. But then he'd stopped being simply a chimney sweep sometime yesterday, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly when the transformation occurred. "We should go," Thomas said, gathering his tools. "Tomorrow will be instructive," the Reverend said. "The railway investors arrive at noon. Sir Edmund's entire strategy depends on presenting Norfolk as stable, traditional, reliable. Everything young James's scandal would have destroyed." As Thomas and Billy prepared to leave, Mrs. Hartley appeared with a wrapped package. "Bread and cheese for your journey," she said, but her eyes conveyed more. Gratitude, perhaps, or recognition of services beyond contract. Outside, the night was clear, stars visible despite the nearness of Norwich's glow on the horizon. Billy climbed onto the cart's bench, already half asleep again. Thomas looked back at Thornfield Manor, its windows dark except for Sir Edmund's study, where lamplight still burned. Tomorrow would bring resolution of one kind or another. The railway men would come with their contracts and calculations. Sir Edmund would present his proposals, and James would begin his redemption through labor. The priest-holes would return to their silence, keeping their secrets for another generation to discover or ignore. The morning of the railway investors' arrival broke crisp and golden, as if Norfolk itself had dressed for the occasion. Thomas arrived early, ostensibly to complete his survey of the chimney network, but really drawn by an instinct honed through years of reading houses and their inhabitants. Something would happen today. He could feel it in the very stones of Thornfield Manor. The household moved with choreographed precision. Servants polished silver that already gleamed, arranged flowers that needed no arranging, checked and rechecked preparations that had been perfect since dawn. Mrs. Hartley conducted this orchestra with subtle gestures and meaningful glances, her keys providing percussion to the domestic symphony. Thomas worked in the study's chimney, the most straightforward of all Thornfield's flues, yet somehow the most revealing. Here, Sir Edmund's business life left its residue. Not just soot, but the accumulated anxiety of ledgers and contracts, percentages and projections. The railway age demanded new mathematics, and not everyone could master the equations. Through the study window, Thomas watched carriages arrive. The London men descended in dark wool and confidence, their faces showing that particular combination of greed and caution that marked successful speculators. Sir Edmund greeted them in the drive, every inch the country gentleman, though Thomas noticed how his fingers worried the head of his walking stick. James stood beside his father, transformed from yesterday's desperate gambler into today's dutiful heir. His clothes were conservative, his manner subdued, the perfect supporting player in his father's performance. Yet Thomas caught him glancing toward the library windows, toward the chimney that had nearly betrayed them all. "Mr. Blackwood," Billy whispered from the doorway, "Mrs. Hartley says you're to check the dining room chimney, the one that connects to the breakfast room." Interesting. The dining room would host today's crucial luncheon, where business would be discussed over port and pleasantries. Thomas gathered his tools, noting Billy's excitement. The boy sensed drama the way animals sense storms. The dining room chimney proved unexpectedly complex, another of those Tudor modifications that suggested hidden purposes. As Thomas worked, he discovered what Mrs. Hartley must have suspected. This chimney, also connected to the network of passages. A person positioned correctly could hear every word spoken at the dining table. Was this invitation or warning? With Mrs. Hartley, Thomas suspected it was both. The luncheon began at 1 o'clock precisely. From his position in the chimney, Thomas could hear everything with startling clarity. Sir Edmund's voice, carefully modulated, explaining Norfolk's advantages for grain transport. The investor's questions, sharp as winter frost, probing for weakness in his proposals. "The Liverpool line has proven problematic," one investor noted. "Cost overruns of 30%. "Different terrain, different challenges," Sir Edmund responded smoothly. "Norfolk's flatlands present fewer engineering difficulties." Thomas heard James interject, his voice steady. "I've prepared a comparative analysis of construction costs across similar topographies." Surprise from the investors. The son had done his homework. Thomas smiled in the darkness. Perhaps redemption through labor had already begun. The conversation turned to financing, percentages, partnership structures. Through it all, Thomas noticed what wasn't being said. No mention of the morning's visit from creditors. No hint of family crisis. The Thornfields had closed ranks, presenting unblemished unity to these London judges. Then, disaster. Thomas heard it in the sudden silence. The clink of silverware ceased. A new voice, oily with false concern. "I understand young Mr. Thornfield has connections in London's more speculative establishments. The Golden Wheel, particularly." One of the creditors from yesterday, or someone they'd informed. The information deployed like a dagger between courses. Sir Edmund's response came cold as January. "My son's education has been comprehensive. Understanding all aspects of London's financial world, including its dangers, makes him more valuable as a business partner." Bold, turning weakness to strength through sheer force of will. But Thomas heard the uncertainty in the investors' murmured responses. Doubt, once seeded, grew like soot in an uncleaned chimney. James spoke again, different this time. Not defending but confessing. "Gentlemen, since you raise the subject, yes, I frequented the Golden Wheel. Yes, I lost more than I could afford. The experience taught me something vital about risk and responsibility. My father has restructured my debts as a loan against future earnings. I'll work for every penny, understanding its value in a way I never could have learned from ledgers alone." The honesty was unexpected, disarming. Thomas heard one investor chuckle. "Well said, young man. We've all had our educations in folly. The question," another added, "is whether Norfolk's grain transport can provide sufficient return to justify our investment." Sir Edmund began presenting numbers, projections based on harvest yields and London demand. Thomas recognized the strategy, overwhelming detail to restore confidence after emotional disruption. But something was happening in the chimney network, a disturbance Thomas felt rather than heard. Someone else was in the passages. Thomas moved carefully through the connecting shaft, following the subtle sounds. In the priest hole adjacent to the dining room, he found an unexpected figure, Reverend Ashworth, listening intently to the negotiations. The old minister showed no surprise at Thomas's arrival. "Insurance," he whispered. "Sir Edmund asked me to witness the discussions, in case disputes arise later." Thomas understood. Trust in business was a luxury few could afford. Even, or especially,
with railway investors whose promises could evaporate like morning mist. They listened together as the luncheon progressed. The investors were warming to James's honesty, seeing in his confession a certain brutal pragmatism they appreciated. The conversation turned technical. Rail grades, locomotive specifications, the delicate engineering of prosperity. "There's another factor," Sir Edmund said finally. "The cholera in London will drive demand for clean Norfolk grain. People trust food from rural sources." Morbid but accurate, disease and profit had always been reluctant partners. The investors recognized the truth, discussing how to position Norfolk produce as healthy alternative to urban supplies. Thomas felt rather than saw the Reverend's disapproval. "They trade on death," the old man murmured. "They trade on life," Thomas countered. "People need food, clean or otherwise." Through the wall came the sound of glasses raised, a toast being proposed. "To Norfolk's future," someone said, and the response came as a chorus. Agreement achieved, deals structured, the railway age embracing another corner of England. The Reverend shifted in the confined space. Young James performed well. Perhaps his trials served a purpose. "Every chimney needs a good fire to clear it proper," Thomas observed. "Sometimes the best cleaning comes from controlled burning." They heard chairs scraping, the luncheon concluding. The investors would tour the estate, examine the proposed railway routes, calculate their percentages one final time. Sir Edmund had won his game, or at least this hand of it. Thomas made his way back through the passages, emerging in the study just as Sir Edmund entered with one of the investors. Both men stopped, surprised. "Still working, Blackwood?" Sir Edmund's tone carried layers: annoyance, amusement, perhaps approval. "Nearly finished, sir. Your chimney network is extensive, but sound. With proper maintenance, it should serve for generations." The investor, a sharp-featured man with calculating eyes, studied Thomas. "Useful thing, a good chimney sweep. Knows all the house's secrets, I imagine." "A professional sweep knows what to clean and what to leave undisturbed," Thomas replied carefully. Sir Edmund's smile was thin as paper. "Quite so. Blackwood has proven most thorough in his work." The investor departed, and Sir Edmund moved to his desk, suddenly looking his full 58 years. "They'll invest," he said quietly, "despite or because of James's confession. I'm not certain which." "Perhaps both, sir. Nothing convinces like truth, even partial truth." Sir Edmund looked at Thomas sharply. "You're an unusual tradesman, Blackwood." "These are unusual times, sir. The railway changes everything, not just the landscape." The investors departed at 4 o'clock, their carriages rolling away through autumn dusk toward Norwich and the London train.
Thomas watched from an upper window, noting how Sir Edmund remained on the steps until the last carriage disappeared beyond the elm trees. The old man's shoulders sagged slightly. The performance ended, the wait returning. Billy had been sent to prepare their cart, but Thomas lingered, some instinct holding him at Thornfield. The house felt charged, like air before lightning. He made his way to the library under pretense of final inspection, but really following that indefinable sense that comes from years of reading buildings and their moods. James was already there, standing before the fireplace with a lamp. He'd removed the grate and was preparing to climb into the chimney himself. His good clothes had been exchanged for workman's rough cloth.
his face set with desperate determination. "Lost something, sir?" Thomas asked quietly. James spun, nearly dropping the lamp. "Blackwood, I thought you'd gone." "Not quite yet."
That chimney's been thoroughly cleaned, if you're wondering. Not cleaned, searched. James set down the lamp with shaking hands. There were other papers in that priest hole, documents I need to destroy before. He stopped, but Thomas could complete the sentence. Before his father found them, before the creditors returned, before whatever grace today's success had bought expired. "What kind of documents?" James laughed bitterly. "Promissory notes. Not just to the Golden Wheel. I borrowed from other establishments to pay earlier debts. A spiral, Blackwood. Each loan covering the last, interest-consuming principal. Mathematics becoming madness." Thomas felt the familiar weight of other people's secrets settling on his shoulders. "How much?" "Another 2,000, due within the month." James moved toward the chimney again. "The papers are hidden somewhere in the network. I was drunk when I hid them, afraid of discovery." Now I can't remember. Footsteps in the corridor, measured, deliberate. Sir Edmund entered, and Thomas saw he'd expected to find them both here. The older man carried a leather portfolio, which he set on the reading table with deliberate care. "Father, the Reverend Ashworth has an interesting hobby," Sir Edmund interrupted. "He studies our family history. Archives, documents, correspondence dating back centuries." He opened the portfolio, revealing aged papers, including a full map of the priest hole network drawn by my grandfather. James went very pale. "I've known about the passages since childhood," Sir Edmund continued. "My father showed them to me, as his showed him. Every generation thinks it discovers these secrets anew." He pulled out another document, modern, covered with James's handwriting. "I found these this morning while you were performing for our investors." The promissory notes. All of them. "I was going to destroy them, hide them better. Continue the deception until it destroyed you?" Sir Edmund's voice remained level, but Thomas heard the strain beneath. "Sit down, James. You too, Blackwood. You're part of this now, like it or not." They sat, an unlikely trinity around the library table. Sir Edmund spread the documents out like a general planning a campaign. £5,000 in total debts. The 1,800 I've already addressed, plus these additional obligations. He looked at his son. "Did you think me blind? Did you think I wouldn't notice the withdrawals, the nervous letters from London, your midnight rides? I thought I could manage it, win it back, or find some scheme." "Every gambler's epitaph," Sir Edmund turned to Thomas. "You discovered the priest holes. You could have exposed James immediately, could have earned a considerable reward from various interested parties. That's not my trade, sir. No. Your trade is reading soot patterns and chimney drafts. Yet you read this situation clearly enough." The older man stood, moved to the fireplace. "My grandfather once hid a Catholic priest here for 3 months. The man was wanted for treason, saying Mass was still a capital crime. My grandfather wasn't Catholic anymore, hadn't been for decades, but he understood that sanctuary transcends theology." Thomas saw where this was heading, the parallel being drawn. James will work in the business, not as heir but as employee. Every penny beyond basic sustenance goes to these debts. It will take years. Sir Edmund faced his son. "You'll live here, but without the privileges of the heir. You'll learn what money means by earning it with your hands and mind." "Yes, father."
The railway investment will help, but only if managed carefully. No speculation, no clever schemes, just grain and transport, the honest exchange of goods for coin. He paused. Blackwood, I have a proposition for you. Thomas waited. These passages need sealing.
Not all of them. Some have historical value. But the network that allows spying, eavesdropping, deception, those must be closed. I'll pay you well for the work. More importantly, I'll pay you for your silence about what you've learned here. My silence can't be bought, sir, but my discretion comes free with professional service. Sir Edmund almost smiled. The Reverend said you were unusual. Very well. Will you undertake the work? Thomas considered. Sealing the passages meant ending their temptation, removing the possibility of future deception. It was destruction in service of preservation, closing doors to keep the house standing. I'll need Billy's help and full access to all areas. Granted. James stood abruptly. I need air. He walked to the window, staring out at the darkening grounds. Those investors, they believed my confession, didn't they? About learning from failure? They believed it because it was true, Thomas said. Partial truth is still truth. Philosophy from a chimney sweep, James turned back, and Thomas saw something had shifted in his expression. Desperation replaced by resignation, perhaps acceptance. Will you really seal them all? The priest holes? Not all. Your father's right. Some are worth preserving. History needs its monuments, even dark ones. Thomas stood, gathering his professional dignity. But the listening posts, the spy holes, those serve no good purpose. Mrs. Hartley appeared at the door, her timing impeccable as always. Sir Edmund, dinner is served. I've set an extra place if Mr. Blackwood would join you. The invitation hung in the air like smoke, a chimney sweep dining with gentry. It violated every social convention, yet here they stood, three men bound by shared knowledge and mutual need. I should check on Billy, Thomas said diplomatically. The boy's in the kitchen being spoiled by cook, Mrs. Hartley informed him. He's quite safe. Sir Edmund made the decision. Join us, Blackwood. We have details to discuss. The dining room still smelled faintly of the luncheon's success, cigars and port, confidence and calculation. But now it held only the three of them, served by Mrs. Hartley herself rather than the usual footman. Privacy within privilege. The work will take several weeks, Thomas said, accepting soup he didn't quite know how to approach with the array of silverware provided. Some passages can be bricked up, others need more careful treatment. And the cost. Thomas named a figure, substantial but fair, enough to secure his business through winter, to properly train Billy, perhaps to take on another apprentice. Sir Edmund nodded agreement. There's something else, James said suddenly. The creditors who came yesterday, they'll return. The 1800 was just the first payment. Let them come, Sir Edmund replied. The railway contract provides leverage. They'll accept installments, rather than risk losing everything through scandal. Thomas recognized the strategy. Sir Edmund would use his new success to renegotiate his son's failures. The railway investor's confidence became currency for managing crisis. Through the wall, faintly, came the sound of Billy's laughter from the kitchen. The boy was indeed being spoiled, probably eating better than he had in years. Thomas felt a sudden, unexpected contentment. Not happiness, exactly, but the satisfaction of problems faced and partially solved. Tell me, Blackwood, Sir Edmund said, cutting his meat with precise movements.
What made you choose chimney sweeping as your trade?
It wasn't idle conversation. Thomas heard genuine curiosity beneath the question. The work of sealing Thornfield's secret passages began on a gray November morning that matched Thomas's methodical mood. He and Billy arrived with a cart full of bricks, mortar, and tools, prepared for weeks of careful destruction. Mrs.
Hartley had cleared the affected rooms, ensuring privacy for the delicate task ahead. Thomas started with the listening post between the library and study, that thin partition that had carried so many dangerous conversations. As his trowel spread mortar, sealing away temptation, he thought about walls and what they meant. Every wall, both protected and divided, kept out and kept in. The trick was knowing which function mattered more. James worked alongside them, surprising everyone. He'd appeared that first morning in work clothes, ready to labor. "I need to understand construction before I can understand destruction," he'd said, and Sir Edmund hadn't objected. So the gentleman's son learned to mix mortar, to lay bricks, to feel the satisfaction of building something solid with his own hands. By the third day, they'd developed a rhythm. Thomas directed, Billy fetched and carried, James did the heavy work. The young gentleman's soft hands blistered, bled, then slowly hardened. He didn't complain, though Thomas caught him examining his palms sometimes, with wondering expression, as if they belonged to someone else. "My grandfather would be appalled," James said one afternoon, wrestling with a particularly stubborn brick. "Manual labor was something one paid others to do. Your grandfather never had 5,000 pounds in gambling debts," Thomas observed. "True. His failures were more genteel. Bad investments in canal companies, mostly." James managed to position the brick properly, smiled at the small victory. Perhaps every generation needs its own form of education. They were working in the attic space, sealing the upper network of passages. Through the narrow windows, Norfolk stretched brown and gold toward the horizon. The railway line was already being surveyed, wooden stakes marking its future path across ancient fields. Progress, Thomas reflected, always required some destruction of the past. Mrs. Hartley brought them lunch: bread, cheese, cold meat, the honest food of working men. She served it without ceremony, though Thomas noticed how she checked James's hands, satisfying herself that he was treating the blisters properly. "Any word from London?" James asked her. "Your father manages the correspondence now," she replied carefully. The unspoken hung in the air. James was no longer trusted with his own letters, his own business. Everything filtered through Sir Edmund's careful oversight. It should have been humiliating, but James seemed almost relieved, freed from the burden of deception. On the 5th day, they made an unexpected discovery. Behind one sealed panel, Thomas found a cache of documents far older than anything they'd encountered. Wrapped in oilcloth, preserved against centuries, were papers dating to the 1590s. Catholic prayers, certainly, but also correspondence, letters between hidden priests and their protectors, discussions of faith maintained despite persecution. "We should burn these," James said immediately. "They're dangerous." "They're history," Thomas countered. "Your family's true history, not the convenient version." They brought the documents to Sir Edmund, who examined them with scholarly interest. "My family was Catholic for longer than we've been Protestant," he mused. "These letters, they show the cost of that faith. The fear, the sacrifice, the constant deception." One letter particularly caught his attention. a priest thanking the Thornfield family for sanctuary, blessing them for their courage. "He was caught 2 weeks after leaving here," Sir Edmund said, consulting a historical record. "Hanged at Tyburn. Yet he blessed us for our courage." He looked at James. "Perhaps courage is simply doing what must be done, regardless of fear." The work continued through November's darkening days. Each sealed passage meant one less opportunity for deception, one less temptation toward dishonesty. Thomas found himself philosophizing as he worked, sharing thoughts with Billy about the nature of secrets and structures. "Every building's got its hidden spaces," he told the boy. "Question is whether we use them for good or ill." "What's good about hiding?" Billy asked. "Sometimes hiding protects. Those priests weren't criminals, just men with unpopular beliefs. The Thornfields who hid them weren't traitors, just people who valued mercy over law." Thomas selected another brick. "But hiding can also corrupt. When we hide to deceive rather than protect, that's when the rot sets in." One evening, as they finished sealing the last of the listening posts, Reverend Ashworth visited. He examined their work with approval, running his fingers along the new mortar lines. "You're ending centuries of tradition," he observed. "Ending centuries of temptation," Thomas corrected. The Reverend smiled. "Perhaps they're the same thing. Every tradition becomes corrupted eventually, twisted from its original purpose." He turned to James. "Your ancestor who built these passages would understand. He was protecting faith. You were protecting yourself. Both forms of desperation, but one noble, one less so." "I prefer to think I was protecting my future," James said with newfound dignity. "Just choosing the wrong methods." As November progressed toward December, the work neared completion. Only the historical priest holes remained unsealed, those in the library, the chapel, and the oldest part of the house. These would be preserved, documented, perhaps shown to future generations as reminder of persecution and survival. The railway construction had begun in earnest. Teams of Irish navvies cutting through Norfolk soil, laying the iron rails that would carry grain to London markets. Sir Edmund's investment was already showing returns, orders flowing in for next year's harvest. The house's mood lifted, servants humming as they worked, preparations beginning for a modest Christmas celebration. On the final day of Thomas's work, Sir Edmund called him to the study. James was there too, and Thomas was struck by how the young man had changed. His face was leaner, marked by outdoor work, his hands rough but capable. He looked less like a gentleman and more like a man who happened to have been born into privilege. "The London creditors have agreed to a 5-year payment plan," Sir Edmund announced. "The railway profits will cover it, assuming decent harvests and no disasters." "And if there are disasters?" Thomas asked. "Then we'll face them as they come. But without secret passages, without hidden spaces for deception." Sir Edmund pulled out a purse heavy with coin. "Your payment, Blackwood, plus a bonus for your discretion." Thomas accepted the money, his family's security for months to come. But something remained unfinished, some ceremonial close to their strange partnership needed. "There's one more thing," Thomas said. He produced a brick, one of the originals from the priest holes. "Tradition says when you seal a hiding place, you should leave something of value inside, a gift to the future or a weight to hold the past in place." James understood immediately. He pulled out a piece of paper, wrote quickly, then folded it small. "My confession. the whole truth of my debts and how they came to be. Let future Thornfields know that we all carry our failures." Sir Edmund added his own paper, the railway contract, symbol of adaptation and progress.
Thomas contributed something unexpected: his wife Mary's wedding ring, which he'd carried since her death. "For remembrance," he said simply. They placed these items in a small box, which Thomas mortared into the final brick of the final seal. The priest holes were closed, their purpose ended, their temptations removed, but their memory remained, built into the very structure of the house. Mrs. Hartley entered with Billy, who carried a tray of wine. Good wine, Thomas noticed, not servants' fare. She poured for all of them, even Billy receiving a small measure. "To honest work," Sir Edmund proposed. "To second chances," James added. "To knowing what to seal and what to preserve," Thomas concluded. January brought snow to Norfolk, transforming the landscape into something pure and deceptive, beauty covering the hard earth beneath. Thomas stood in his workshop on Timber Hill, watching Billy teach the newest apprentice, a boy called Samuel, how to properly oil the chimney rods. 3 months had passed since Thornfield Manor, and winter had settled into Norwich like smoke into fabric. The money from Sir Edmund had done more than secure their winter. Thomas had expanded his business, taking on 2 more apprentices, purchasing new equipment. But more than that, the work at Thornfield had given him a reputation for discretion that brought custom from other great houses. It seemed every old family had chimneys that needed careful attention, secrets that required professional silence. A letter had arrived that morning, delivered by a servant in Thornfield livery. Thomas read it again now, warming his hands by the workshop stove. James had written in his own hand, the penmanship less flourished than before, more practical. "Blackwood," it began, without elaborate greeting. "The railway opens next month. Father wants you to inspect all the chimneys before the inauguration. But I write for another reason. The work continues. Not just the chimneys, but the harder work of rebuilding trust. I've learned the grain trade from the warehouse floor up, as promised. My hands no longer bleed from honest labor. The debts reduce monthly. London seems a foreign country now, its temptations academic rather than immediate." Thomas smiled at that. The young man who'd hidden in priest holes, stealing secrets, had transformed into someone who faced his obligations directly. Sometimes the greatest courage was simply showing up each day, doing what needed doing. Mrs. Hartley had added her own note at the bottom. "The house feels different now, cleaner somehow, though that's not quite the right word, as if we've finally aired out rooms that were closed too long." Through the workshop window, Thomas watched Norwich wake to its daily commerce. Carts rumbled over cobblestones, merchants opened their shops, the cathedral bells marked the hour with bronze certainty. The cholera that had threatened in October never reached Norfolk, though London suffered through December. The railways that some blamed for carrying disease also carried food to the hungry, medicine to the sick. Progress, Thomas had learned, was neither wholly good nor evil, merely inevitable. Billy approached, Samuel trailing behind like a shadow. "Mr. Blackwood, Samuel's wondering about the priest holes. I told him the story, but he doesn't believe houses can have secret spaces." Thomas considered the boy, another workhouse child, all sharp angles and suspicious eyes. "Every building has spaces between spaces," he told Samuel. "The question isn't whether they exist, but whether we acknowledge them."
He pulled out his architectural drawings, the ones he'd made of Thornfield's passages before sealing them. See here? This is what the house showed the world. He overlaid another drawing, and this is what it hid. Two truths existing in the same space. Samuel studied the drawings with intense concentration. But why hide anything? Sometimes for protection, sometimes for deception, sometimes because we don't know any other way. Thomas rolled up the drawings carefully. Our job as chimney sweeps is to clean what's dirty, clear what's blocked, but sometimes we also seal what's dangerous. That afternoon, Thomas received an unexpected visitor. Reverend Ashworth arrived in a borrowed trap, looking older than he had in November, moving carefully on the icy cobblestones. Thomas invited him into the small office behind the workshop, pouring tea from the pot that always simmered on the corner stove. "I'm dying," the Reverend said without preamble. "The physician gives me perhaps 6 months. I wanted to settle certain matters while I still have clarity." Thomas waited, knowing death made its own rules about conversation. "The Thornfield family has asked me to write their history. The true history, including the Catholic years, the priest holes, everything." The old man sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Including recent events. How would you prefer to be remembered, Blackwood?" It was an odd question, presupposing Thomas mattered enough to be included in a family's chronicle. "I'm just a tradesman who did his job. You're the man who chose discretion over profit, who helped a family seal its destructive secrets while preserving its meaningful ones." The Reverend pulled out a small leather journal. "I've been recording stories all my life. Yours is worth preserving." Thomas thought about legacy, about what remained when the soot settled. "Write that I understood the difference between cleaning and cleansing. Cleaning removes dirt. Cleansing removes sin. I'm equipped for one, not the other." The Reverend smiled. "Wisdom from unexpected sources. Very well." He made notes in his careful script. "Young James has asked to study for holy orders, did you know? After his debts are paid. He says he wants to understand sanctuary from the other side." Thomas wasn't entirely surprised. Men who'd faced their own darkness sometimes sought light professionally. "He'll make an interesting priest. Or a terrible one. Time will tell." The Reverend stood carefully. "Thank you for the tea and the philosophy. Both warm an old man's bones." After he left, Thomas returned to supervising his apprentices. Billy had grown 3 inches since October, his voice beginning to crack, manhood approaching like a distant train. He worked with confident efficiency now, teaching the younger boys with patience learned from his own struggles. "Mr. Blackwood," Billy said as they closed the workshop for the evening, "do you miss it? The adventure at Thornfield?" Thomas considered. The daily routine of chimney sweeping, the soot, the smoke, the careful climbing, seemed mundane after those weeks of secrets and moral complexity. But mundane had its own satisfaction. "Every chimney tells a story, Billy. Most are simple. A season's worth of fires, a bird's nest, accumulated time. Thornfield was dramatic, yes, but drama's exhausting. There's peace in ordinary work." They walked home through Norwich's narrow streets, snow beginning to fall again, softening the edges of buildings, hiding the city's sharper angles. Thomas thought about the priest holes, sealed now but not forgotten. They'd served their purpose, sanctuary for some, temptation for others, ultimately education for all involved. At his lodgings, Thomas found another letter waiting, this one from Sir Edmund himself, brief, formal, but with warmth beneath the propriety. The railway was bringing prosperity to Norfolk, the grain trade flourishing, James working with genuine dedication. The family would survive its crisis, perhaps emerge stronger. "We gather for the railway opening on February 15th, Sir Edmund wrote. "Your presence would be welcomed, not as tradesman, but as friend." Friend. Thomas turned the word over like a piece of coal, examining its facets. Could a chimney sweep be friend to gentry? The old England would say no, but the railway age was writing new rules. Perhaps that was progress's true gift, not just faster travel or greater profit, but the possibility of unexpected connections. That night, Thomas sat by his own fire, watching flames dance in the grate. He thought about the priest holes at Thornfield, dark spaces that had held both desperate faith and calculating greed. Every generation used them according to its nature, its needs, its fears. The fire settled with a soft crash of coals, sending sparks up the chimney into the winter night. Somewhere those sparks would cool and fall, becoming part of Norfolk's ancient soil. Everything returned to earth eventually. Soot, secrets, even the proudest families. But sometimes, before that return, there were moments of unexpected grace. A young man learning honest labor, an old house freed from its shadows, a chimney sweep recognized not just for his trade, but for his discretion. Thomas banked the fire carefully, preparing for sleep. Tomorrow would bring more chimneys to clean, more apprentices to train, more quiet stories told in soot and ash. The dramatic tale of Thornfield Manor would fade into memory, becoming one story among many in his tradesman's collection. But tonight, in the space between waking and sleeping, Thomas allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd navigated between justice and mercy, truth and discretion, the powerful and the desperate. He'd sealed away temptation while preserving history. Not bad for a chimney sweep. The snow continued falling outside, covering Norfolk in temporary purity. By morning, coal smoke would stain it gray, wheels would churn it to slush, life would reassert its complicated presence. But for now, in this quiet moment, the world seemed clean and full of possibility. Thomas smiled in the darkness. Every ending was also a beginning. Every sealed passage suggested new openings elsewhere. The railway age was coming to Norfolk, bringing its own secrets, its own hidden spaces. There would always be work for someone who understood that buildings, like people, needed both their darkness acknowledged and their light preserved. The church bells struck midnight, bronze voices carrying across the sleeping city. Thomas listened to their fading echoes and thought of priest holes, of sanctuary and its price, of young men learning redemption through labor, of old secrets finally laid to rest. Then he slept, dreaming not of dark passages, but of clean chimneys, honest work, and the quiet satisfaction of problems solved through patience, discretion, and the occasional application of well-mixed mortar. Winter held Norfolk in its grip, but spring would come. It always did.